Yesterday, retail giant Walmart, the largest private employer in the country, announced plans to drop its DEI initiatives, adding itself to the growing list of popular brands that have nixed their woke policies.
Like many companies all across the United States, we've been on a journey and we continue to be on a journey. And what we're trying to do is to ensure that every customer, every associate feels welcome here to shop and to feel like they belong. And we're going to continue to make the best decisions we can that makes everyone, our customers, our associates, feel like this is an environment they can shop in and thrive in.
That was Walmart U.S. President and CEO John Furner speaking with CBS Mornings earlier today. The move by Walmart is being hailed as the biggest win yet for the movement to end wokeness in corporate America. Could it encourage other companies to follow suit? Joining me now to discuss this is Steve Soukup. He's the vice president and publisher of The Political Forum and the author of The Dictatorship of Woke Capital: How Political Correctness Captured Big Business. Steve, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thank you for having me, Joseph. I appreciate it.
It's good to see you again. What's your reaction to the latest announcement from Walmart?
Well, I think it's an enormous announcement. It's a very big deal, not just because Walmart is the largest private employer in the world and the largest retailer in the world, but also because it signals the ongoing movement toward,
like many companies,
a preference cascade in the abandonment of woke policies in various corporations in the United States. This summer, we started with a handful of corporations, some of them, most of them, connected to a conservative customer base, but it's moved on from there. We moved, I think, by the end of the summer, Lowe's had abandoned its DEI policies. Ford had abandoned its DEI policies, and now we get the largest company in the world by revenues doing the same. I think that's important because it points to an ongoing trend that I think at some point becomes a very potent preference cascade.
Now, talk a little bit, if you would, about why you think this is happening. Is this a response to complaints from customers? Is this a response to kind of financial consequences of moving too far to the left? How do you explain these moves, and specifically the one from Walmart?
Well, I think the term I use there, preference cascade, sort of explains it all. That's a term that was first introduced into the American lexicon by the economist Timur Kuran roughly 35 years ago. And which he used to describe the collapse in totalitarian regimes, and specifically the totalitarian regimes in Eastern Europe. And essentially what it tells us is that there is this pent-up frustration among corporate executives with the way that certain agitation groups, certain left-wing shareholder groups have ridden them over the past several years to do things that are not in line with the business and not in line with their shareholders' best interests. They went along because they were afraid of being singled out. Just like your average citizen in the Soviet Union, you go along because you don't want to be the only one who speaks out against the government. All of these corporations went along thinking that everybody else believed this, so we better believe it too. What happens eventually is that some spark sets off a recognition among these individuals, or in this case, companies, that says, you know what? I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who thinks that this is garbage, that this is something that is harming my company, that is harming my shareholders. And eventually, momentum builds, and you end up with everybody almost simultaneously recognizing that this is a corrupt regime and it's something that needs to be overthrown. In this case, the spark, what we've been missing in this movement for the last 4 or 5 years was Robbie Starbuck. Robbie got on board, and Robbie decided that he wanted to carry out sort of an investigative journalism attack on some of these companies that have conservative customer bases, and yet were embracing these liberal policies. And he really pushed them And so once it started with, Tractor Supply Company and moved on to Harley Davidson and then moved on, to some other corporations, it became sort of an unstoppable, uh, an unstoppable role of companies saying, you know what, we're going to get involved in this too because we agree with them. It turns out we're not alone. So I think that there's been a change in the way people understand the existing regime, the existing organizations that have forced these policies on American business.
Now, the headline here is that Walmart has dropped their DEI initiatives. But what does that mean in the real world? Is this something that will manifest itself only in the HR practices of Walmart, or is this something that customers will actually notice?
To be honest with you, I don't think it's something that customers will notice necessarily, but it is something that shareholders will notice over the long run. And a big part of this stakeholder movement that we've seen over the last, decade to 2 decades in American corporations has been to focus on distant stakeholders. And I think that what we're seeing here is a return to focusing on stakeholders that are closer to the corporation and that mean more directly to the corporation. And in this particular case, it's shareholders. These policies are not good for business. These policies are not good over the extended term for the way the company functions and its profitability. And so a return to standard traditional business practices is something that's really going to benefit shareholders. And I think that they're the ones who are going to see it most directly over the near to medium term.
Do you have a sense of how this will impact Walmart's operations? Is this merely like hiring quotas, or is there more to it than that?
To be honest with you, I don't know what Walmart's specific DEI programs were. I do know that a lot of these corporations that have announced that they are ending their DEI programs, part of what that means is that they're ending their affiliation with the Human Rights Campaign, which is the largest and most prominent of these pressure groups that have pushed these companies towards these policies. So I think it's important to understand that what Walmart has done, what some of these other corporations, Ford, Lowe's, Tractor Supply, et cetera, have all done is decided that they're no longer going to play this game with the Human Rights Campaign, where the Human Rights Campaign gets to determine every year whether or not they're a inclusive employer. So I think that that's the primary benefit that we're going to see here is that these corporations have basically moved beyond kowtowing to the pressure groups.
Yeah, and just to bring people up to speed who may not be aware of all the backstory of this, the Human Rights Campaign, and you described them as kind of the largest pressure organization on the left, they've essentially gone to these corporations over the years and said, unless you do what we want, unless you adopt all of these progressive HR policies, we're going to accuse you of being racist. We're going to accuse you of being anti-gay. And they changed the criteria in such a way that you had to affirmatively give them money in order to achieve a perfect score on their index. And if you didn't have a perfect score on their index, they accused you of all sorts of terrible things, trying to ruin your brand. And so it really was kind of a bully tactic, kind of a shakedown tactic, mafia style, where they're saying it's a nice business you have here. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. So why don't you give us some money so we'll give you kind of social media protection and not destroy your reputation. Do these movements away from the HRC indicate that these kind of accusations of racism aren't working anymore?
Yeah, I think that they were, for the most part, they were largely false to begin with. And I think in society, we're seeing a change of preferences in general. I think that was demonstrated in the last election. That's demonstrated in the movement of minority groups away from the Democratic Party toward the Republican Party in this last election. I think that people are tired of the claims that racism is an issue or that homophobia is an issue based on evidence that is flimsy at best. So I think that, that means that some of these charges have lost their punch, that it's no longer going to be enough to say, aha, they're a racist company without having something more substantive to back it up than simply saying it.
You mentioned that Walmart is not the first to make this decision. Do you think that we are in the beginning of an even greater movement than what we've seen in corporate America, back toward neutrality, at least, rather than left-wing activism?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things. That's one of the reasons why I think the Walmart decision is so important, is because it builds on the momentum that was started this past summer. I think that we are on the verge of a preference cascade. And I think that, if we go back to the Human Rights Campaign and the tactics that they use, it's pretty clear that they run an authoritarian, if not totalitarian, operation in the way that they pressure corporations to bend to their social will. And so I think that this is very important. And I think that the distance that these companies are putting between themselves and these policies, as well as the organizations that push these policies, is extremely important. And I think that it eventually builds enough momentum that everybody finally says, breathes a sigh of relief and said, look, we've been waiting for years to figure out a way to get out from under the thumb of our oppressors. And finally, we have a way. Finally, we understand that we're not alone and that everyone is, in fact, tired of the pressure that they've been putting on us, contrary to our best business interests.
Yeah, the left has depended for quite a while on the ability to just say anyone who disagrees with us is a bad person. And it seems that corporate America and the rest of America, and we saw this in the election, I think is developing some immunity to that pressure. And it's no longer as effective as it once was. How do you expect the left to respond?
That's an interesting question. And I think that that there are some people on the left who have responded to incidents like the corporate race away from DEI, as well as the election, by saying, hey, look, we have gotten out of touch. The problem is that even if that were a majority of people in the Democratic Party or the majority of people on the political left, the radicals still control the institutions. The radicals control the media. The radicals control Hollywood. The radicals control education and higher education. And so there's a distinct disadvantage for any centrists on the left who wish to dissociate themselves from the policies that have been so disastrous, both for business and for the Democratic Party, in that the institutions of cultural transmission are all controlled by the radicals. I mean, that's a problem that we on the right have faced for a long time. And now those on the more centrist part of the left are facing it as well. So I think that there's going to be a struggle on the left as to who's going to control things. And if the centrist left is going to win back any power and have any effectiveness in fighting some of this stuff, they're going to have to join with the centrist right and even the conservative right in taking back some of these institutions from the radical leftists.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk for a moment about another company that's part of this broader conversation, Target, because we'll remember they made headlines somewhat recently because they were very much a part of kind of the left-wing activism circuit. And specifically, they got attention because they were selling tuck underwear and swimsuits for children, really kind of embracing this whole trans narrative. The boys can become girls if they want to. A lot of parents push back. Well, recently, they failed to meet earnings expectations. Their stock price plummeted 20% after that report. Is this just coincidence, or is Target's kind of leadership on the left politically having a financial impact?
I'm not a retail analyst, and I'm not an analyst of Target in particular, so I don't want to attribute the political pushback any greater significance than it might have actually had. I'm sure there are other factors involved. At the same time, it didn't do a whole lot for Target's reputation. Again, this not only were they pushing products and policies that were contrary to the wishes of their customers, but they were also making it clear that they were caving into the pressure groups. I mean, with Target and Bud Light, it's clear. It's almost inarguable. You can draw the line from the HRC to the corporation, to their policies, to the boycotts that occurred. They were inarguably doing the bidding of the pressure groups. So I think it has damaged Target's reputation. Whether or not that's what's responsible For the fallen stock price, I'm hesitant to say, but certainly it hasn't helped.
Yeah. What's your advice to those of us who are just consumers? We kind of watch most of this. We don't own any corporations. We can't direct corporate policy, but we care and we want a culture that is healthy, that's promoting truth rather than lies, that isn't destructive to our children. What do you encourage people to do as we observe these developments?
Well, I think one of the most important things people can do is watch where they invest. It's easy to say, watch where you shop and boycott Target, but some of that stuff is very difficult. You may live in a town that has only Targets and not Walmarts. It may be difficult for you to get your basic needs met without shopping at Target or without ordering from Amazon or engaging with some of these companies that have some bad policies. So I would encourage people to be careful about their investment. Be careful about with whom you invest, what funds you buy, what stocks you're invested in, what companies, what their policies are, et cetera, and voice your opinions to the companies that you own. Call the investor relations office. Nobody in the investor relations office wants a stockholder calling them and complaining. It's far more impactful to do that than to call a customer service rep. So I would encourage people to pay very close attention to where their 401k or where their IRA is invested and with whom it is invested.
Steve Soukup, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me, Joseph. I appreciate it.